All right, everybody, welcome back. We are coming off a really awesome weekend last weekend at the Ducks Unlimited Expo in Memphis. It was a great show. We had a great time, and it cannot wait to be back. We got the full Memphis experience, great food, and it was just an awesome weekend. So if you haven't been to that, you should go. It was fun for that to be in the middle of the Prairie Pothole region issue that has been going on, and it was cool how much support was in the same room, to try to protect that region. And if anybody hasn't tuned into that, I suggest you do the research on it, because I don't believe that fight is probably over. So we might have to do that again. But anyway, nevertheless, it was a great weekend and looking forward to it. So getting back on track here. If you've been following along with what we're doing, we've been doing the 5 pillars of wetland management, what we've deemed a perfect wetland. And so we went out, we looked at all the wetlands that we knew of that were doing a great job in our opinion. And we constructed a list of those things that those properties shared. And so if you haven't listened to all the episodes, I heavily suggest you do that. But the first being water control. You got to have good control of your water. Secondarily to that, you have to have food diversity. So not just one food source. We want a lot of different food sources. And then third, last week, we did the open water to cover ratio. And so how much should we mow? How much should we leave? How much should we have in different types of habitat? Things like that. And so this leads us to the one that can definitely affect all of those. And it is pressure and hunting program management. And so this one is probably one of the more talked about ones. And I think that there's more and more research coming out about it all the time. We're going to get into that. I know Danny's itching to get into some of his research that he's been doing. But I definitely believe this is probably one of the more important ones. My arrogant comment that I always say is that if you're sitting in your unit and you're looking around and your habitat is excellent, you can say your habitat's excellent and your pressure management is really good, you're not overhunting your property, there should be ducks there. You should have a full strap of ducks usually. And if you don't, one of those two things is probably lacking. So nevertheless, with that, we're going to get into it and we're going to start from the beginning of what is pressure. So Danny, why don't you start off with that and tell us what pressure is?
Well, to me, hunting pressure is just, you either have too much of it or you're conservative and you understand that you need to manage pressure in order to have successful duck hunting and also to take care of the ducks. There's been a lot of research done out there, and I'm going to give a shout out to Ducks Unlimited because they have, and we'll reference this article and the information that they put out there. It's just really good information that over time, I think we need to try to go back and understand that back in even the 90s, we were doing research on disturbance and how it affects birds and how it affects bird behavior. Now we're coming all the way up till now with all the new technology, and pressure definitely impacts the way birds behave because that's what they do. They have to react to pressure to survive, and that's just built into them. So I'm just going to try to go through a few things that have been proven or have been studied. And they've been written up, and they become research projects where they found out information. So some of them will be really obvious, and some of them may be new news to the listeners. So I'm just going to kind of go through them. A lot of people think that hunting close to sanctuaries is a bad thing, and it holds all the birds, it keeps them there, they don't fly out. But actually, the studies show that sanctuaries and refuges improve hunting on surrounding areas. Because birds they're not disturbed, they have sanctuary, they're not pressured, so they stay there, they have food, and they tend to fly out from those refuge areas. It's when they get overhunted on areas that are overhunted and pressured too hard, and there's an internal refuge there, let's say, they just hunker down and stay there. I mean, they don't, and then when they move, it's at night. So you guys have probably seen some of that across the country. If you have too much hunting pressure, they're gonna hunker down during the day, and then they're gonna fly out at night as soon as shooting hours end. So one of the ways, or one of the thoughts out there, and I've been talking to these guys about it, and I don't know how realistic it is. You guys out there will decide how realistic this is. But to get a landowner co-op started, or to talk to your neighbors and start looking at the amount of sanctuaries / refuges there are in the geography around you. And if there's big gaps, big holes, then maybe you talk to each other and say, why don't we put one here? And why don't we work with the local biologists, whether it's state or federal, and make sure we put all the habitat elements that they need in the sanctuary. And then what's going to happen is, because these birds are going to distribute out farther, if they have different sanctuaries scattered across the geography where you guys collectively have come together and said, we need more refuge. Yeah, I'll raise my hand. I'll create refuge over here. This guy over here is going to create refuge over here. We're going to spread this out geographically. These birds are going to leave these refuges eventually. They're going to scatter out and disperse. And then that means more than likely more ducks in my decoys. But you've distributed the pressure. The birds are moving. They've got more sanctuary to go to. And I don't know how many folks out there have thought about that, but we probably need to huddle up more as a team and not be so independent and really rely on each other to come together and see what that might look like. Because research shows that, these birds, these refuges need to be approximately 10 miles apart. That's kind of what the research shows, that's when they're the most effective, and that's when the birds will disperse to these different areas. Now I'm going to take Kale. We just talked about a scenario which I thought was very exciting. These guys manage pressure to the point that it's incredible. But it's a collective thing. They got, and I've hunted there with Kale and have very much enjoyed it. But the quality definitely has been high. They have an internal refuge that they manage. The habitat is outstanding. Every square foot of this place just about is good habitat. And they've got a diverse mixture of high energy food, corn, and excellent moist soil habitat. And they know where the birds like to be. They don't hunt the refuge areas. They hunt the perimeters of them. Birds get up, move around, they harvest their birds, they leave, and they leave them alone. And I've got 4 other examples that I could talk to you about that do that not necessarily the way that Kale does it, because he's almost isolated in terms of sanctuary. So he manages his own pressure. Those guys manage their own pressure that way, and it's extremely successful. So it's a real success story. These other people I'm talking about have a big, large complex, thousands, tens of thousands of acres of private wetlands, but within their properties, they have a dedicated sanctuary that's never violated. And when we say pressure, that means no hunting ever, no disturbance ever. No ATVs, no lights, no walks, no nothing. These are buffered, insulated sanctuaries that have no pressure on them. And I've seen areas as small as 25 acres work on a fairly large piece of property, a couple hundred acres, where those birds distribute from that area to another portion of this 200 acres. And these guys have excellent hunting, from these birds transferring or redistributing from that point out to where they're hunting on another portion of the area. So pressure is so key to your success. And I think you need to, I just think you need to have some kind of take the initiative. Some of you guys and gals out there have the initiative and energy to reach out to your neighbors and start talking to them about this in the waterfowl world. So I encourage you to do that and experiment a little bit with trying to get more sanctuaries out there and manage your pressure for sure, because ducks, they're not looking for, a day's worth of no pressure. They're looking for a week's worth, so you can't, temporal refuge or half day hunting. It's better than nothing, but nothing takes the place of managing pressure more than limiting your hunting and also providing these inviolate refuges where nobody disturbs it. It's almost like you got a wall around this thing. Nobody goes in ever. It's undisturbed. And the birds, they imprint on that. And when they imprint and you're not hunting them and you scatter those around all over the place, it could really be in your favor. And so always remember that ducks are, and I'm going to quote this out of DU's article because it's perfect. It's perfect for all you people and myself and everyone else that loves ducks and waterfowl hunting to listen to this. Safety first. Food second, keep the commute as short as possible. Those 3 things, if you can put that together in the landscape and broaden it out past where you are, don't just think about yourself, broaden it out to your neighbors, your friends who might be interested in doing the same thing. It could make a significant difference. So I encourage you to try it.
I appreciate the kind words there, Danny. Our team, our team of people are very disciplined in that. And because what we've seen over the years is that, you can take a piece of property that maybe your habitat work didn't do very well that year. And if you leave it untouched and they find that place safe, that a lot of times they'll use it just because they're safe there. And so there is an element that safety is as important, if not, if we quote the DU article, it's safety first, food second. But I definitely think that safety is one of the primary things. But pressure also doesn't necessarily have to be hunting. It's access. It's, maybe that neighbor driving in a certain way, hurts your farm, or you're driving hurts that person's farm, or whatever else. Maybe there's ways that you could share roads or anything like that. But I mean, I'll walk, half of a mile to check a pump. We've got e-bikes that we can drive in ditches to where we can't be seen. Like it is a very disciplined approach to making sure that those ducks feel safe there. And that we could get into imprinting, we could get into all kinds of things. But I think, trying to keep this high level on pressure today. Dad, I remember a long time ago, you probably have no recollection of this. We were doing something on Shanks during the day. We didn't go hunting, but we pulled up to a guy, and a guy talked to you through the truck window and was like, why don't you guys just flip flop? Hunt morning and then you hunt afternoon the next day and stuff like that. And so it brought up a question to me of like, a lot of places in Missouri, not all of them, probably a lot of other places have 1 o'clock closures, 1 o'clock cutoff times, or other cutoff times. We have one internally, but what does that give us? Why do we do that? Like, why 1 o'clock? I mean, you might have some insight into those things, but maybe you take it in that direction.
Yeah, no, I got some other thoughts on there too, on some of the other things that we've talked about. But I think from the standpoint of 1 o'clock closure, that's just an arbitrary time. I mean, it could be 12 o'clock or maybe 10 o'clock or what have you. But the idea behind that concept is basically it gives the birds a significant portion of time during the daylight hours to use that habitat. And that's twofold, really. It's one, it's the opportunity for those birds to come off the refuge areas and get out and acquire the nutrients and the food resources that they need that we provide for them without being shot at. And so they're getting out there, getting comfortable and getting that. And then, of course, they don't know what time it is either. They just know, so that's about the middle of the day here, about time for me to go find that one spot I like to eat. So they fly out. Well, they happen to be an hour too early, and so it's good for the hunting from that standpoint. But really, it's just about, the main reason is just about establishing that bird use in daylight hours on those hunting pools in particular. You got all the birds in the refuge, and they don't know where the refuge line is per se, but they sure learn where the hazards are at and where they're getting shot at. So they adapt to that really quickly, and so giving them that 1 o'clock closure, those birds tend to move out off the refuge. They spend a little bit more time. They buzz out into pools, look around, go back. They just move back and forth a little more. And so again, mostly it's just aimed at getting daylight use on those pools, giving hunters opportunities to hunt those birds, and gives the birds that opportunity to utilize the resource that we're providing for them as well.
Perfect. Weigh in on your other thoughts there. I know you have them.
Well, I think some of this research Danny brought up is really interesting. I've been reading some of that stuff myself. Some of what I've been reading is coming out of Tennessee and some of the research projects there. And distance is important. I mean, like just throw out a scenario. Say you got a nice sized refuge, whether it's public or private or what have you, that holds a lot of birds, and you happen to be 10 miles the other way from that spot, and there are no more refuges on your side anywhere. But if you go the other direction, opposite of you, maybe 6, 8, 10 miles the other way, there's another refuge over there. Those birds are going to start interchanging back and forth, but your chance of seeing those birds are going to be limited because you're just far enough out of that kind of that influence circle where you have more impact on those birds. And so, I would argue that just try to get those things scattered in all directions. Just if you got 10 different wetlands, try to get habitat refuges in 10 different directions, basically, because the more you spread that out around the landscape, the more those birds are going to get out and mingle and move around and get into the different refuges. And when they do that, obviously they're moving over top of your property and other people's properties during the daylight. And so that ups your odds for hunting as well, I think, and certainly doesn't have to be 10 miles away. You can have one, 3 or 4 miles away and could be great getting bird use. And in some of our cases on our public refuges, that's kind of what happens. We have some of those areas where we have refuge in different parts of the area and the hunting pools between them. And those birds are trading back and forth in those refuges quite frequently. And then they're coming back and forth across over the hunting pools. So you have a better opportunity to hunt them that way. The other thing I'd like to say too, and pressure, Danny, I think did an outstanding job of talking about all that, but really pressure is anything that, just causes birds disturbance. It's not just us hunting or shooting at them or what have you. And I think, Kale, you said it too. It could be the ATV or the lights at night coming in or what have you. It's all about anything that causes that bird to quit doing what his normal behavior is at that point in time is technically pressure, if you will. So the things that are really disturbing are the people walking down a levee, like you said, with flashlights or headlights on a truck pulling into a property right before daylight. Those are the kind of things that really disturb the birds pretty heavily, I think. And I know several examples of hunting pools on public areas where these birds will set in the refuge 200 yards from a party that's just shooting away over there in that pool. Birds get up out of the refuge, fly right back in there again and get shot at again. In those cases, those birds are not seeing the hunters. They're hearing the guns going off. They're hearing some of that other noise, the splashing around, talking, but they keep coming, and it's because they aren't seeing them, I think. So that same distance, if those birds were 200 yards from the levee and that hunter walked up on the levee and was walking around, it wouldn't be very long. Those birds would probably all bail out and head for another area. So you have to be really mindful. It's you can get by. We do it a lot up there on the property we hunt on, where we hunt off the corners of the refuge, different directions. Those birds are so ingrained into where that refuge is for them there that we can get by and hunt and shoot. And the disturbance, most times you never see a bird get up, other than just naturally getting up. They're not responding to the hunting activity. And so just keep that in mind, and that could be different on every property, like Danny said, to, find that spot where you can hunt it and not run them birds out and let them come out on their own when they're.
Yeah. I'm not sure where we're going with if we're going to hit this or not, but I'm going to hit it real quick. We're talking about hunting right now, but pressure and disturbance has a compounding effect on birds that are migrating. It has a compounding effect on birds trying to produce eggs. It's minimizing pressure on birds in terms of disturbance is key for all of us to pay attention to. Because we could go through a whole list of the negative impacts that disturbance makes on birds when they're nesting, when they're doing fall migration, spring migration, then when they get back to the nesting grounds. There's all kinds of things like Kale was saying, Michael was saying, but not just during fall and spring migration, even on the breeding ground. People flushing them off nests, they're more susceptible to predation on the eggs. The ducklings, boaters that are scattering ducklings, when they first come off the nest and they're trying to, they're assembling as a brood, breaking the broods up. They get disoriented, sometimes get separated from the other birds, and they perish. So there's just there's a lot of things to pay attention to, and we can get into that tonight, or we can save it for another time. But I'm telling you, folks, it's a long list of negative impacts for disturbance. So just keep that in mind, and we focus mostly on spring and fall migration here in Missouri and what we talk about, but it even impacts them, on the breeding grounds.
Yeah, I think I'm going to jump on that for a second too. I think the other thing that's really important about that is that disturbance that's going on at all seasons of the year is also having an impact on those birds' health, if you will. Because if they're in a good feeding location and they keep getting jumped out of it, they're having to spend time basically in trying to find that safety feature that you talked about initially, instead of doing the things they should be doing, which is getting that food and getting themselves healthy and ready for the next task, whatever that might be, whether it's migrating or whether it's laying eggs or whatever it is. So yeah, it's hugely important.
I have some thoughts about, Danny, you made mention, and I don't know that you were going this way, but it clicked in my head. It seems like this is anecdotal, and maybe there's research out there to support my theory. I just haven't read it, but it seems like we have fewer large migration events now than maybe we would have previously because the weather just isn't as cold. That's my anecdotal thought here. But it seems like any mistake we make, whether that be poorly timed water management or maybe while learning, the property, because every property handles pressure differently, so you have to learn that. You're going to make some mistakes in that process. You have a chance to fix that a little bit easier. Dad, I'm curious on your thoughts on Shanks if you had this same thought, but it's a little bit easier to fix that if you handle a migration event a little differently. So a lot of people see a big storm coming. It's like, oh man, we got to go. It's like, well, maybe we don't go. And maybe we let the birds use the property. They're fresh. They're new. They have no clue where the refuge is at. And maybe they'll reset that for us and we can have another go at trying pressure. But it also, from taking care of the ducks, it's another thought too of like, they just completed a pretty decent migration event headed south. I'm talking about the north going south right now. They just had a pretty good migration event, and they're out of energy. They need to land and find some pretty high quality food in a hurry to be able to recoup from that. So I don't know if that's any of that landed with you guys or not, but that's what I was thinking about.
Yeah, I've definitely got some examples of that, I think, and thoughts on that. But if you look at it from some of our larger public areas and experiencing that over different areas, even on migration days, they're pretty special to watch when you're out there, whether you're hunting or, in my case, as a manager, just kind of sitting out watching to see what was happening. Those birds, typically, you'll see these bigger groups come in from the north, and all of a sudden they'll just be working the pool, and you'll know they're different because it's not the two or the singles and that kind of stuff flying around. A lot of times it'll be the 25, 30, 40 bird groups that you'll see just kind of working different habitat and very prone to the hunting side at that point. And those birds will get shot, and those bigger groups will get shot at routinely. And like you said, they may have just made a 700-800 mile flight, and they're really wanting to get down on the ground and find something to eat and get some rest. But the other side of that, what I see typically on these areas, again, with the refuge areas, and especially if you have those in close proximity to each other, like Danny was talking about earlier, that really helps offset that, I think, because those birds can still get shot at in a group. But I've watched it many times where a big group of those birds will work around over a pool and get shot at, and you'll see them take off a different direction. All of a sudden they see the refuge and they just suck right in and go into the refuge. And so, I think in the cases where you have good refuge habitat around, I think that probably would be better situated for hunting on those more harsh weather days like that, instead of not going. I guess I don't want to say not go for sure. I understand what you're saying. But
maybe you go, but you're not going to the core. Maybe you go set up somewhere where you're not going to disturb them as bad or something like that. I don't know.
Well, the nature of migration too is those birds are going to be spread out a little bit in places that you may not shoot birds a lot of days. You might shoot them on a migration day, so that's a valid point. But yeah, I would be more inclined to say it's more about the refuge again. We need that refuge, and if we have adequate refuge scattered around the landscape, those birds will be fine. I think they may get a disturbance and have to go another mile somewhere, but they're going to find that refuge and then they're going to be good to go.
Yeah, I agree totally with that, Michael. I think that's a great point. We can mitigate for that, that focused hunting effort at that time. I mean, that's really what most waterfowl hunters live for, is that migration day. And, we like it too. We've experienced it. We love it. And, but we also care about the ducks. And I think, most all of our viewers are going to care about the ducks. They just maybe need to connect the dots on trying to promote more refuge, more sanctuaries, mitigating whatever factors are out there to keep the ducks in good shape. And so I would love to know an example of, at some point, of someone that actually has tried a waterfowl co-op and has tried to distribute and has been successful with in some ways of scattering out these sanctuaries across their geography. And so anyway, it's an interesting concept to think about.
I think it's shifting the conversation a little bit to thinking more about the ducks a little bit. Cause we got to give them a spot to hang out and be safe and be happy. And they behave totally differently when they're safe. It's wild. They do things that you never think they would do. They are just a totally different animal when they're safe than when they're not. And you can tell it like that. I'm sure everybody has examples of that. They act like springtime ducks. They just go wherever and do whatever. And I think there's probably examples of this. And Danny, where you're from, I would imagine that there is some trading behavior between some of the refuges that some of the private habitat is putting on the landscape. Maybe that's not. Maybe I don't know if you know that or not, but I would imagine there would be.
There is absolutely
good or not.
That's a great point, Kale. There absolutely is. I mean, there is established refuges, large ones that everybody depends on. And because of that refuge and that trading around puts ducks in decoys next to, adjoining land next to that refuge, they've created refuges on their land. And I've been a part of promoting and having these landowners understand how important these refuges are and scattering them around. We've got a refuge on the property that I manage, and it's not an inviolate one. We'd have to change the whole way we do business on this particular piece of property. It's not mine. I'm just in charge of managing it. But it does serve as a temporal refuge, which is better than nothing. But the other one, the larger one, is inviolate. one next to it is inviolate. There's one right across the road. It's a small refuge, but the manager that took it over knew the value of a refuge. So their hunting has improved. They put just a small area, but a small refuge. Probably it might be 40 acres, 30 acres. And it's right along the road front, and people drive by it, but they've got it screened, and the birds stay right inside. I mean, it's sanctuary. It's undisturbed. They don't get out of it. They stay right there. And so, it would be fun just to go through the examples that we all know about over time. But I've got several folks that they've got small inviolate refuges, and they say this just flat works. So it's, they do trade, and they trade all the time. And, the confluence area is a very successful private land duck hunting enterprise. And it's because of there's large refuges scattered all over the place. Not saying there couldn't be more, because I've promoted a few myself that have been small, but they work, but they're in conjunction with larger refuges. And it just, what these guys are talking about, Ducks Unlimited and these researchers that are out here working on this, what they're talking about absolutely works from what I've seen, just observation. And if you're curious about a refuge on your place, go ahead and set one up and then observe. We talk about observing things all the time, observational research, see what the birds are doing, see where they're trading from, see where they're flying from. You don't have to hunt every day. Do a little bit of homework, do some observations, and find out what the trade situation is. What is the orientation of these birds? What are they doing? Where are they going? If they're traveling to different refuge or sanctuaries during the day and they're crossing over your land, you got a good chance to participate, and have maybe a decent hunting experience. So just keep learning out there. That's what I've been trying to do. Lifelong learning about duck hunting. That gets addictive.
No doubt. I'm going to throw out a quick example kind of similar to that too. One of our members sent me a request last year and asked about a place that they had really good bird use in going into a really cold snap, and they had some ice and froze up. And, as we all know, ice really changes how these birds respond. And, they were wanting to get in and hunt some, I think, and we're hoping to hunt that unit some more. And the birds just left. He said they were kind of got into a nocturnal event all of a sudden just because of the ice, and, ice changed their habits. But he said they were getting up and leaving and going to a different direction. And so we got to talking a little bit about what was that away, and kind of figured out, well, there's a pretty good piece of habitat not that far that direction, and those birds had oriented to that apparently. And then we kind of talked about it. And it's like, well, I said, just let it be. Don't go in there. Just those birds are using it at night a little bit still. So I said, they're going to adapt back in. You still had good food in it. And they waited, in about maybe 6, 7, 8 days, those birds started getting back. And all of a sudden, afternoon, you'd have, 30 or 40 of them on the picture. Then it started turning into 150 on the picture, and so again, the value of just not disturbing that property, that was one of their pools that they hunt a lot, but the birds left because of a different reason. And then, they were trying to get them back in there. And again, it was the lack of disturbance. I think that's the reason they stayed and came back eventually. So,
yeah, that's an excellent example, Michael. And you mentioned that camera effect. You're actually monitoring that based on a camera. So that cuts your time down, because that's going to your phone if you have a, cellular camera. And so that's another trick. I mean, our technology has increased for us. So
absolutely,
put a camera out there and you can watch them start to come back maybe.
The new reveals have a live button on it. You can know right now whether there's ducks in front of it or not. So,
yeah.
Well, I think that's a big factor too. We talk about how you control your pressure and all these other things. And again, that's one of the ways you can check your water management. I know we've done some different little coursework on that, or Kale has put some stuff out about it, but use those cameras. I mean, they're great for what the water levels are. You don't have to go in and read the structures. You don't have to wonder what's going on. And, you might be in your office doing your water management, and that's just a big trick to not disturbing those birds in the process of trying to do your other duties.
Yeah. Excellent point.
So last point, and then we could probably do part 3, 4, 5, and 6 on pressure if we really wanted to. But the thing that I want to ask is, we might have listeners out there for the first time that are saying like, hey, I've never really intentionally thought about the way I'm hunting using my property or anything like that. And so, Danny, you have just recently, this is the second year that property's been doing that. Talk about how you approached, how are we going to hunt this property? Because and yours is a totally different thing, I think, and you can maybe discuss what the intents of that property is and stuff like that. But I think it would be interesting for us to discuss how do we approach knowing we're hunting it right, we're hunting it wrong, or we can hunt it more, we need to hunt it less? What does that look like? And maybe how do you start from the very, very beginning?
Well, you guys know me by now, but I always go into a new area as conservative. So, because I'm thinking of two things. I'm thinking about hunting success, and I'm thinking about birds and benefiting birds. So those are my two key things going into a program is how do I have a quality hunt, and how do I manage for the birds as well? So, and this was not set up by me, and it was already in place. But one of the first things we did was we looked at the habitat. And so for a hunting program, to get that quality hunt, I want diversity of habitat types. So we immediately incorporated, instead of 150 acres of row crop, we converted it and restored it to 150 acres of as a moist soil unit. So it all came up into this prime habitat. And the edge of this area was hunted in the past. It was labeled as a temporal refuge up until Thanksgiving, and then you could go hunt it. Well, we took those blinds out. So we completely separated that unit with excellent habitat. And our hypothesis was, or my mentality was, it's going to be better hunting because we're going to have this undisturbed area, and it's right next to where our hunting area is. We're not going to have an inviolate sanctuary, but we're going to have at least the opportunity to have a temporal area to hunt, because we're only going to hunt 6 blinds, which to me is too many. Again, I'm on the conservative edge, but we had about 130 acres.
Clarify that. 6 blinds.
On 130 acres.
But that's not every day. That's like 6 options. We have 6 choices.
No, we have 6, and it's not every day, but it's 6 blinds on 130 acres. They did have 8 blinds, but I said, okay, 6 is the max. I mean, it's hard for me to take 6 on 130 acres, but that's what we're going to do. And then we're going to look at trying to, weekends we have to hunt. Weekends we have to hunt because of the different partners and everything that we have involved, and people getting off and people being able to utilize the area and take the opportunity with the groups that we had. But we would always skip a day, like a Monday we would skip, and sometimes 2 days. As much as we could skip during the week, we would skip and have one day that we would hunt. We never try to put hunting back to back. So we might have a 2-day split where we didn't hunt. We'd hunt a day during the week, and then we'd have another 2 days before the weekend. So we would try to break it up that way to provide that temporal refuge, but always had that safe sanctuary, high food value, optimum feeding habitat on the area. And those birds, the success there was very good. In that scenario, and I can't, it's not optimal, but with the circumstances that we had, I would say optimal is 1 blind per 40 acres. If you're really looking at you wanting to set this up and you've never done it before, 1 blind per 40 acres would be my suggestion to consider. On this parcel, it wasn't like that. It was tighter, but we tried to mitigate that with the quality of the habitat that we had in the refuge, set aside a refuge that was really more temporal and more undisturbed than what it was before, and provide good hunting or good habitat in the hunting pools. But we diversified there with high energy food. Corn is what we use there in the hunting pools. And so, that's kind of how it was set up. And those birds would get up and they would leave the refuge and they would fly over the hunting pools. And, and on some days it was fantastic, and other days it was okay. Some days it was poor. We're hunting a wild bird. It's duck hunting. We also didn't change our plans based on weather. I think if you're just starting an area to hunt, you need to change your strategies according to the weather and try to hunt the best weather days, which northwest, southwest winds would be good days with, 10 to 15 miles an hour. And so that's kind of the thought process that we went through, is providing high quality refuge, providing high energy foods, reducing the number of blinds that we had that were originally there, that the previous owner would have hunted them, but we wanted to cut that down. We took the 2 off the refuge boundary that would have really excluded that to be even a high quality temporal refuge. We excluded those. And so those are some of the things to think about. Generally speaking, bottom line, high quality food, limit the number of blinds you have, or at least watch the birds and find out where the honey holes are actually before you set up a hunting program or a blind. Watch what the birds are doing, be temporary, be mobile until you find out what's going on, and then go in and set up accordingly. And that could be a permanent blind in the future if you find out that the birds are really using that spot and they want to be there. But so anyway, that's kind of it in a nutshell.
And Danny, those hunts that you're doing talk about what types of hunts you're doing there.
We are doing something that's fantastic. On this area, it's a private organization that purchased this land.
Plug it if you want.
The Great Rivers Habitat Alliance in East Central Missouri. And I can't say enough positive about these guys. I work for them part-time, but they are outstanding. They're outstanding conservationists. They volunteer their time to serve, the confluence area, one of the largest private land wetland complexes in the nation. They own land there. They waterfowl hunt there. They are in this game to preserve the confluence, promote conservation, promote wildlife habitat, promote wetland habitat, and they're just a bunch of wonderful people. I mean, that's about all I can tell you. And very smart people and very committed and dedicated volunteers. That's what it is. And we do hunts, folks, it gives you goosebumps. We do veteran hunts, first responder hunts, youth hunts. We have veteran hunts that are women only. So that would be the extent of it. The Missouri Department of Conservation is part of this. And they do youth hunts, but they also do first-time adult hunters, a segment of hunters that they've kind of, we don't have enough of them, so we encourage them to come. And it's all these groups, it's so fulfilling for them to come and hunt with us. They're so appreciative. They get so excited. You can tell it's in demand. Hunting is in demand, and it's just a wonderful experience. And the partnerships that we have with the Fallen Outdoors, Missouri Return to Base, Missouri Hunting Heritage Federation, the First Responders, and recently the Safari Club International. They just signed on. So, it's a wonderful group of people and so appreciative. And so we can provide that opportunity on this area, and it's going to grow whether we want it to or not. It's going to grow. And we're just so happy that we were fortunate enough to be on the ground floor of it.
Perfect.
Cool opportunity. That's really good stuff.
Dad, why don't you talk a little bit about, as you develop shanks, introduce new pools, go through a season, how would you approach setting up a hunting program or pressure management on a new property?
Yeah, I think Danny hit a couple of points that are really key on stuff when you're setting it up. And that's one is it's that observational research or observational management that you do. It's easy to get caught up in this idea that I just want to go do this. I want to get it done. I want to make sure I get it on the habitat, or you get the habitat out there this year, hunt this spot this year. Maybe that works, maybe it doesn't, but you're better off most of the time if you just sit back and watch it a little bit. And you can still hunt your property. You can still manage it the same way you want, but just be open-minded and be observant. Just every time you're out there, you need to be watching and learning something, whether you're hunting or whether you're just sitting on the levee watching the birds do their thing. So that was kind of my approach a lot of times in public land management would be, always looking at, because most cases these properties have been developed and managed for several years already. But you're always looking for that opportunity to bring it to the next step. What can we do different, or not necessarily different, but what can we add to it to make it better and improve the habitat, improve the hunting opportunities and that kind of stuff. And so a lot of it was, for me, was just that observation stuff again. I'd hunt the areas, I would watch the areas, and you'd start picking out things like shanks, for instance. We did a fairly major transformation on the refuge system after we did the big habitat project on the south end of the area. We had a significant portion of our refuge was all on the north end of the area, and the whole south end was all hunted. And so by default, the area, I don't even remember anymore, the area is like almost 7 miles long from tip to tip, along the river. And so you had the refuge on that upper end, and birds would never see the south end, so we started looking at it after we did the restoration on the habitat work and had some pools and some better management opportunities on that south end. Then we moved a block of refuge into that bottom end, thinking, okay, well, this will get us birds on both ends of the property, where they can start that natural trading like we've been talking about, trading back and forth from one refuge to the other. And then they'll be crossing over a lot of our hunting pools. And so in that process, we took out refuge that was fairly disturbed. It was right along railroad tracks, right along the gravel road, had cars up and down it all the time. And it wasn't just the sound disturbance, because the trains and stuff. I'm sure you remember me talking about how the trains would always make the new birds flush and fly around. A couple of days after being there, they would sit and not worry about it. So they weren't really worried about the train because they couldn't see it, but they could hear it blow the horn, obviously. But those cars along the road were a real problem because it was open along the road during the days, and bird watchers or folks just getting out and about would pull up along the road and sit there, and those birds would always be getting flushed off that refuge. And so they like to use those pools, but we thought, well, maybe that's better served as a hunting opportunity in those pools because they are getting disturbed a little bit already. And we'll move refuge into more truly protected areas where those birds are able to get away from all of that disturbance. And for those of you that have ever been down on that south end of Shanks, it can get pretty protected down there. Some days you wonder how you got there and how you get back out. But yeah, so that was really kind of the gist of what we did on Shanks to make some big changes to the refuge system and the hunting on it. And I think it really paid off for us. I think it helped us a lot. And again, those are opportunities. We had the opportunity to do that because Mother Nature threw us a curveball and destroyed a lot of the habitat we had. And so, it wasn't like we were trying to do anything different or do something where somebody else made a mistake. We just had problems with the habitat because of infrastructure failure, and gave us the opportunity to kind of revamp, redesign, rethink how we were doing stuff there.
Perfect. Well, I guess with that, we can go ahead and close this one up. We can probably revisit this as many times as we want to, because I don't think we could hit it enough. There is one video that if you're interested in what we're talking about and you want to see a really well done, well filmed video, look, I think it's called Under Pressure. Brad Cohen, his lab in Tennessee, did a phenomenal video on refuges, hunting pressure, well studied, well documented, like truly one of the best done, best laid out, most, conveyed energy for your 12 minutes or 15 minutes you'll ever get on the topic. So if you haven't watched it, I sincerely think you need to. But yeah, I come back to those things. And Danny, you said it, you quoted Ducks Unlimited on that earlier of, we got to have safety, we got to have food, and keep the commute super short. And so if you're missing one of those two things, that we've now done the podcast on to at least point you in the right direction to solve either of those things. So anyway, if you liked what we're talking about today, go ahead and subscribe to the Waterfowl Management Academy. We'd love to chat with you about your property and help you out with any of these topics that you want to talk about. And yeah, good luck with it.